Awesome. Thank you so much. And goodness gracious, we're on week 3 and it's already been 2 weeks of chaos in a row. So welcome to the very chaotic one day at a time big book study. I am glad that you are all here, and my heart for those that aren't able to make it. So where we're going to be diving is on page XVI. Forward to the second edition, just as Peppa was talking about. And actually, maybe to help the people that weren't able to make it, guess what we should kick off with? Why don't we do some review? And some of you are like, oh no, review? Yeah, let's do a little review. Because where we're going to be picking up is the bottom paragraph, this physician. But it is helpful to get an idea of what's happened up until this point. And what are we talking about? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the screen. If I could find it. I found it. And we're just going to do just a quick little bit of review. So where our story begins and if you want to bounce around to page 26 and follow along, you can. And if you're like, girl, no, I just found page XVI, I am staying put. That is okay. I'm so glad you're here. All right. So where our story begins is with a certain American businessman. His name is Roland Hazard. And to be honest, his name is Roland Hazard the Third, because he is a fancy pants, richy pants sort of guy. And he struggled with alcoholism. I mean, they probably didn't call it alcoholism because he was rich, but he struggled with alcoholism. And he saw the best of the best of the best doctors. They didn't really have rehabs or treatment centers, but essentially the best rehabs, treatment centers, the best that he could possibly find in North America. And he continued to get drunk. He then goes all the way to Europe, to Switzerland, to work with probably the most famous, if not the second most famous psychiatrist in the world. And he works intensively with Dr. Carl Jung. And he does this work and he leaves the treatment. And I'm sure nobody knows what this is like, to leave treatment with a feeling that this time is different, y'all. Maybe y'all didn't throw in the y'all. I know that that's not really used in the UK that often, but I love me some y'alls already. And he's like, this time is different, only to get drunk again. He goes back to Carl Jung and says, dude, what the heck? Which is, that's in the transcript. That's absolutely how he spoke. Just kidding. So, dude, what the heck? And so what happens is Carl Jung says, my bad, homie. My bad. I misdiagnosed you. You're an alcoholic, and people like you do not recover. And Roland Hazard is like, is there no exception? And you can almost hear that desperation in his voice. Is there not an exception for someone like me? And Carl Jung says, you know what, there is. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual awakenings. And in Alcoholics Anonymous, that is our solution. That is the solution that we have. The answer to our alcoholism is a spiritual awakening. And Roland Hazard's like, cool, I'll go to like church and stuff. And Carl Jung is like, my guy, they're not handing them out like they do Costco samples. The odds of this thing happening to you are like the odds of you getting struck by lightning. You've got to go out and find it. And what was growing in popularity at the time was a group that was known as the Oxford Group, or the Oxford Movement. And they were a religious organization. They were a little non-denominational, but their whole deal was about living a life that was surrendered to the God of their own understanding, and about having this deep experience of God. And Roland Hazard is like, ooh, I need one of those. So the Oxford Group, they weren't focused on alcoholism. That wasn't their focus. They did sober up some alcoholics in the Oxford Group, but that wasn't their focus. But from that Oxford Group, they had a series of actions, a course of action that later became our 12 steps. So in that moment, Roland Hazard knows what the solution is, a spiritual awakening, and has a way to get it, what will later become our 12 steps. And he travels to Vermont after Abby Thatcher, my homeboy, Throckmorton, that's his middle name, starts having some legal problems, a DUI here and there, and trying to shoot birds while drunk and paint the house. I can relate. Not to that, actually. Neither of those, because I wouldn't kill birds. I love my birds. And I didn't have a driver's license. I know, the real homies, y'all know you don't need a driver's license for DUI. But I relate to getting into some trouble. And he was standing trial, and he was looking at a 6-month commitment. Our guy, Roland Hazard, shows up and persuades the judge to suspend his commitment. Abby Thatcher doesn't want to go to jail, so he has some impetus to take the course of action. And he has knowledge, again, of what our solution is and what the program of action is, which will later become our 12 steps. He then goes, and here's how I like to present Abby Thatcher. Because Abby Thatcher, he was, and actually it's a little bit true, as Rob will tell you, Abby Thatcher, he wasn't really big on like continuing to do this stuff, and he didn't really enjoy being of service. And so I imagine so that part is true. This is me making up the history. But I imagine that Abby Thatcher was like, oh man, I got to carry this message. Gross. Blah. I don't want to do that. He's feeling a little bilious, like blah, carrying the message. No, thank you. I don't want to do it. And he's like, you know what? Who is the most piss his pants, fall down drunk? Man, he won't even remember that I was there. Who is the biggest fall down alcoholic? Meet our hero, Bill Wilson. And so he goes and carries this message to Bill Wilson. Bill Wilson has been in the town's hospital several times before. And from his experience of going to the town's hospital, what he learned of what it meant to be an alcoholic. He learned that he has an allergy of the body, and this is our problem, that I have an allergy of the body, that once I start, I cannot stop. I cannot control the amount that I take. And he also has an obsession of the mind, that thought that he has when he is as sober as I am today. Like when he's sober, he has a thought that takes him back again and again and again to that first drink. And that is our problem. Now that, of course, that obsession is fueled by a spiritual malady. And that's what we're going to treat. And in this moment when Abby Thatcher, Throckmorton, when he carries this message to Bill Wilson has the vital pieces of information that we need to know in order to get well and stay well in Alcoholics Anonymous. He knows what the problem is. The allergy of the body, the obsession of the mind. He knows the solution. We treat that spiritual malady, and we treat it with a spiritual awakening. And now he's got a program of action. He's got a course of action that he can take to get him from that place of hopelessness to that spiritual awakening. And that is what Alcoholics Anonymous is. And so that's a little bit of review here and there. Welcome, everyone, especially those that just joined us, because I have a feeling if you just joined us, you weren't being like it was a workout. It was a spiritual workout to get here. So thank you. Zoom's having some issues. So also, if you're doing that thing, where you're like, it's only happening to me. When it's like raining and it's like, it's raining at me. And those of you in the UK probably are like, yeah, girl, that rain. Zoom issues are happening for everyone. So I am personally so glad you're here. I'm so glad you stuck with it to try to join us. So Bill Wilson, armed with those 3 pieces of information, he checks himself into the town's hospital again. He takes the course of action that later becomes the 12 steps, and he has a powerful spiritual awakening. From that moment, he goes and he tries to help others. He tries to help other alcoholics to carry this message. And he's not successful until he goes to Akron, Ohio. He goes to Akron, Ohio to do this really important business deal. He was going to combine these companies. And some of us will relate to this moment, actually, because he was going to combine these companies, and it was going to be everything that he needed. It was going to be, he was going to be set on his feet financially. He was going to be rocking and rolling. It was going to be great. And then it got bogged down in like lawsuits and like people weren't talking, and his reputation was damaged. And he's alone in a strange place, Akron, Ohio, the rubber capital of America. Just that's my fun fact about Akron. Actually, I got another fun fact about Akron. I should focus. But my other fun fact about Akron is their sports team for the university is the Akron Zips. And if you're not sure what a zip is, it's a kangaroo. Why is the kangaroo the mascot of Akron University? I don't know. That's a mystery for us to figure out. Focus. But he's in this hotel, the Mayflower Hotel. He's broke, he's discredited, he is feeling that sense of guilt and shame and a loser, and he's just, life's not going the way it should. And he gets that thought. Oh, you know what might be nice? A drink. And fear grips him. He knows that thought. That is the insidious insanity, the mental obsession. And in that moment, he is restored to sanity. And his sanity came as the result of continuing to work with others for 6 months, trying to carry this message. And he picks up the phone, and he's got a connection with a power greater than himself and a desire to help somebody else. And after a series of phone calls, and really a series of phone calls, he gets connected with Dr. Bob. And what we left off on was this idea that for me to stay sober, I've got to work with others. I've got to carry this message to others. That is what I have to do. So now we're picking up where we 11 minutes. That's 11 minutes of review. So and welcome. You came literally at the perfect time. I just finished review, so you missed all the boring stuff. We were talking about the University of Akron. Went on a tangent or two. So, bottom of XVI, the physician. Now, the physician is Dr. Bob, had repeatedly tried spiritual means to resolve his alcoholic dilemma, but had failed. He was already in the Oxford group. He was in the Oxford movement. He was attending meetings, and at no point did he have the ability to get and to stay sober. And so he was so close and yet so far. And it said, but when the broker is Bill Wilson, just if we're like who's who and the what's what, bottom of page XVI, so glad that you guys were able to make it. Again, the Zoom issues are happening to everyone. So if you were able to make it, God wanted you here. Not that God didn't want the people that couldn't make it, because I miss you guys that aren't here. I do. And I love you guys that made it. Anywho. It says, but when the broker gave him Dr. Silkworth's description of alcoholism, and this is a word that I would like you to highlight or underline, and it's hopelessness. The physician began to pursue the spiritual remedy for his malady with a willingness he had never before been able to muster. That malady is just a French fancy word for sickness. It's not, I have a spiritual malady. It's a malady. Pinkies up, But that's an important thing. We'll see this again and again and again. It is only when I am able to see the reality of my predicament, which is to say, it is only when I am able to see the hopelessness of my alcoholism, that I am willing to accept the hope that is on offer. And that is the transition we all make. It was the exact same thing with our guy, Roland Hazard. It was only when the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang, then those gates don't swing both ways. And he knew he was in trouble, and out of desperation, is there no exception? And from that place of hopelessness, was he willing to search for the spiritual awakening? It was the same thing with Bill. Bill Wilson had his step one experience. And we see his step one experience on page 8. You don't have to turn there, especially if you had a hard time finding XVI. Don't worry about it. But on page 8, he talks about no words can tell of the loneliness, the despair that I felt in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. That was his step one experience. He could not stay sober on that because I cannot stay sober on a step one. A step one is the profound realization that I will drink again. That is step one. But it is when I have that step one experience that I'm willing to grab a hold of the hope. And so for Dr. Bob, it was only when he had his step one experience that he was willing to grab a hold of these actions that later became our 12 steps with a willingness he wasn't able to muster before. And sorry, it said Robin's posted, and I just said, yeah, because he posts cool stuff in the chat, but you were giving important information. Sorry. But I'll give you a little behind the scenes. We won't bounce around. I'll tell you what happened. What happened is when Bill Wilson gave him this description of alcoholism and its hopelessness, Dr. Bob was like, man, that's me. My homie, Billy Dubs, that's me. That's how they spoke back then. I think my only job is to give the history husbands hernias or something. That's my job. But he had this experience, and he's like, man, that's me. I drank like that. Man, I am willing to do whatever it takes, Bill. This is Dr. Bob. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I'm willing to go to any lengths, not make amends. I'm not willing to do that, but anything else. Does that sound familiar? I know nobody here has ever had a Dr. Bob moment where it's like, amends? No, thank you. And so what happened? Well, he's plodding along, doing his deal for a little while. And then he goes to a medical conference in Atlantic City, and he gets rip-roaring drunk, boiled as an owl, as he would describe it. Oh, he got hammered, and it was bad. He shows up, he gets back to Akron. He had to be given 2 bottles of beer or 1 bottle of beer, some beer and some goofballs. A goofball would be like a benzo, before he had to perform surgery. Yikes. Yikes. I mean, we don't know how the patient did. Oh, I'm just kidding. Probably fine, because we know the historians were looking for the patient, and we know there'd be some sort of lawsuit if he didn't make it. So, and he's a colorectal surgeon, so it's not like a heart surgeon. He might have just had a hard time sitting. I know, sorry, I mentioned that, and that got a response I wasn't expecting. Sorry, he just might have had to stand up for a little while. It might have been fine. Okay, focus page. Focus. Oh, gosh. There is a goal to get through a certain number of paragraphs and pages. I don't think I'm hitting my goal. So he goes, he's given those goofballs, he's given some beer, he goes, and he does not come back until the wee hours of the morning. And there's no Apple AirTags. They can't put location tracing. He didn't have a cell phone. So Bill and Ann are like, dude, where'd he go? Oh God, he probably went on another bender. What he did was he went on an amender. I should have grabbed my amender picture. I have a bunch of amender stickers that I designed. And that's the thing, is Dr. Bob's permanent sobriety came as the result of taking the actions he didn't want to take. And that is, that's all of us. And so if somebody's relapsing and somebody's struggling, it's not what happened. It's what didn't happen. And so if we get back, we got to just do that which I didn't do. So if I want to prevent a bender, I got to go on an amender. Yeah. Anywho, so it says he sobered never to drink again up to the moment of his death in 1950. And so what we're seeing is that permanent recovery is possible. This seemed to prove that one alcoholic could affect another as no non-alcoholic could. This idea that one alcoholic could carry this message to another in a way that no other alcoholic could. Dr. Bob had talked to anyone who seemed to know anything about alcoholism and could not find a solution. He was a voracious reader. He would read, he struggled with insomnia, and he would read and read and read and read. And he found no answer. But another alcoholic, somebody who felt the way that he felt, experienced what he had experienced, could carry this message. And what is the takeaway? The takeaway is that we get to help those that nobody else can help. We get to be an agent for a power that is greater than us. We get to be an expression of love to those who need it most. And we get to have our hand out to those who would otherwise die. That is our great responsibility, and that is also our great privilege. There is a joy, there is a profound joy in working with others. And it also indicated, I'm going to be a pain in the butt. If you could highlight, underline, you could draw stars, maybe a unicorn or a capybara, if you feel called. It also indicated strenuous work. Strenuous. It is meant to be inconvenient. It's meant to be inconvenient. My sponsees know that I'm like, listen, girl, if you are not inconvenienced a little, you can have hobbies. I don't, but you can. If you're not a little bit inconvenienced, you don't got enough sponsees, Strenuous work. One alcoholic with another was vital to permanent recovery. Vital as in life-giving. So if I want permanent recovery, recovery, like not just dry, but I mean permanent contented recovery, that's what's available. That is what is available in Alcoholics Anonymous, permanent contented recovery. If I want that, I've got to work with others. I've got to. It is not optional. Man, I've got to. And it's not just, and service is so important. Thank you to the service team, especially over the last 2 weeks. Oh, it's been stressful. You guys are kicking butt, taking names. Love you. Doing so good. Go team. Go sports. Why am I like this? But also that, like, taking somebody through the actions of the 12 steps. And if you're here today and it's like, I don't got the facilities for that, big man, I want to assure you that you do. You do. And if you maybe you don't, but that is the purpose of studies like this, to have that deep experience so that we have the facilities to carry this message to those who are struggling, big man. That's what we're called to do. And if you don't have that ability, or you're like, I'm overwhelmed, or I'm scared, or I'm going to mess them up, our job is to help you help them. See, I don't sponsor people just so they have a spiritual awakening. I sponsor them so that they can help others have a spiritual awakening. That's what I feel like my responsibility is. Doesn't have to be yours. That's just me. Anywho, I've got a whole lot of tangents for one paragraph. That's how we've done today. So thanks for your patience. Oh, this is, just so you know, a lot of love and tolerance was needed today, to get in, to put up with the tangents. Oh, and here's a little trick. If it really is, if you lead with love, the tolerance will follow. I can't lead with tolerance and hope love will emerge. I got to lead with love. So thank you guys. All right. So it says, hence the two men set to work almost frantically. So moving quickly, because they know if I'm going to stay sober, I've got to work with others. Upon alcoholics arriving at the ward of the Akron City Hospital, their very first case. Now, I'm going to point this out, a desperate one. To be desperate is to be aware of my hopelessness. Again, if he wasn't desperate, he's not going to be open to a solution. So a desperate one, recovered. There's that word again, recovered. Recovered does not mean cured. Recovered means that the obsession of the mind has been removed as the result of these 12 steps. But he recovered immediately. And again, immediately. It does not take long to get well. It really does not take long to work these 12 steps quickly and thoroughly and to have this experience. So recovered immediately and became AA number 3. And his name was Bill Dotson. Bill and then Dotson, Dotson. And I know. So we got 2 Bills and a Bob. Oh, goodness gracious. So we can kind of see why when they were changing out the stories, why they included some new ones, with each edition. Because otherwise this would be a book with a bunch of middle-aged white dudes named Bill and Bob and William and Robert and a Richard or two. Richard or two? That's a little dick joke I made. Sorry. Focus. Thank you for your patience. Lead with love. Thank you. So it says, he never had another drink. Again, permanent sobriety. That is what is available. permanent contented sobriety. Now, if you hear permanent sobriety and you're like, but I'm never cured of alcoholism, yes. There will never be a time where I could ever safely take a drink because of the physical allergy. And there will never be a time where I have the luxury of complacency and not continuing to work these 12 steps as a way of life because of the obsession of the mind. And so I am recovered, I am not cured. And me living in a recovered state is contingent upon the actions that I take on a daily basis. So, this work at Akron continued through the summer of 1935. There were many failures, but there was an occasional heartening success. And if you're working with others and you're carrying this message, there will be failures. There will be. But there will be that success. And it's just, man, and actually, sorry, it's another tangent. Here's my thing. I have never been sponsored in the way that I sponsor others. I've never been sponsored in the way that I sponsor. I've never had a sponsor sit down with me and read the book. I've never had a sponsor ever help me with inventory or amends. But what has happened is over time, my sponsorship style has grown. Because I've stopped doing things that are ineffective. Because, girl, that doesn't work and ain't nobody got time for that. I got to be doing strenuous work. I got to, I better not be spiritually lifting with my back in jerky twisting motions. I got to be spiritually lifting with my knees. It's grown and it's changed. And it's okay if you're like, man, this thing that I do isn't working. It's okay to change it and do that which is more effective. So just throwing that out there. There were many failures, but there was the occasional heartening success. When the broker, that is Bill Wilson, returned to New York in the fall of 1935, the first AA group had actually been formed, though no one realized it at the time. And that AA group was really the drunk squad of the Oxford movement. They had a bunch of alcoholics that were hanging out in the Oxford group. And they were really entrenched in the Oxford group in Ohio, in Akron, Ohio, especially because the Oxford group had been so good to them. And similarly, they were engaged in the Oxford group in New York. Now, the first meeting that was ever called Alcoholics Anonymous or separate from the Oxford group actually happened in Cleveland. Eventually, those other groups split off from the Oxford group, in part in New York, because Bill Wilson had his whole life, he had a profound sense of singleness of purpose. He desperately wanted to help alcoholics. That's where his heart was. And if you hear stuff about Bill Wilson, remember that idea that Bill Wilson's, the single purpose of his life was to help alcoholics. That's what he wanted to do. And so when these Oxford group people are like, hey, could you go reach out to your Wall Street sober friends? He's like, no, I want to go help drunks. That's what I want to do. So that's a little bit of history sprinkled in. It said a second small group promptly took shape at New York, to be followed in 1937 with the start of a third at Cleveland. Now, the Cleveland group was started by a gentleman by the name of Clarence Snyder. And I always like talking about Clarence Snyder because he was a bit, bless you, he was a bit of a difficult person. And I'm sure nobody knows what it is like to go to your home group and the business meeting or group conscience, as they say in the UK, and there to be a difficult person. I know. In Alcoholics Anonymous, difficult, challenging personalities. Again, ones that make you feel a little bilious, like, oh, I don't want to go to the business meeting. Unless you're one of those conflict-loving people, like, cannot relate. I'm a conflict-averse little page over here. So that's a reminder that God can even use difficult people. And so, Clarence Snyder. Besides these, there were scattered alcoholics who had picked up the basic ideas in Akron and New York, who were trying to form groups in other cities. And actually, there was a recent history post about the first 25 groups. And I thought, oh boy, that's pertinent to today. I should grab that. And I didn't. But some of the early groups were Chicago, like some more in like New Jersey. There were some early groups that kind of spread out around Akron, Cleveland, and New York. And it goes on to say, and also, what are the basic ideas? The basic ideas are What is my problem? Physical allergy, mental obsession. What is my solution? Spiritual awakening. And what is the course of action? And what later became the 12 steps. Those were the ideas. It says by late 1937, the number of members having substantial sobriety time behind them was sufficient to convince the membership that a new light had entered the dark world of the alcoholic. 1937, Bill Wilson got sober at the end of 34, like right before we had hit 35. So the longest stretch of sobriety was about 2 years. And I'm just pointing that out because people were getting sober and staying sober. And 2 years of sobriety was miraculous. Not that we don't celebrate it, but oh yeah, I got their 2 years. You know what I mean? Alcoholics did not stay sober that long before Alcoholics Anonymous. It was not possible. Again, I just want to emphasize the hopelessness of the illness as well as the hope. And when it talks about that a new light had entered the dark world of the alcoholic, I'm going to make a joke. A new light. What a great name for a big book study. Perhaps one that happens at Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, and 1 a.m. for those in the UK. I record it. I like to. But also, if you are a bit of a spiritual nyctophile where you're like, the light. It's okay. It's okay if you're, and like also, what would a spiritual nyctophile even look like? Somebody that's afraid of the spiritual light? And I was one, by the way. I was so comfortable in my darkness. You know what I mean? I was so comfortable in my pain and my misery. And there would be some stupid jerk like me that would show up all like, wee, and like God, and like, woohoo, and like enthusiasm. And I'd be like, bleh, you know, like gross, ugh. Like I was in so much darkness for so long that light was like almost repellent. And the takeaway from that is if you're annoyed by me, what that actually means is that it's a you problem, not a me problem. yeah, because it's like, what did I have to do? I had to take some work to experience that light. I'll help you write inventory on me. I've helped a lot of people write inventory on me in particular. I'll help you with it. But I love that idea in part because I love the metaphor of God as light. And that is a metaphor that we see all throughout this book. And if that resonates with you, amazing. If that doesn't, don't worry about it. But light is the way in which, and I talk about this a number of times, light is not simply what I see. Light is the way in which I see. Light allows me to see the same landscape, the same room, the same person in a brand new way. So I am not one of those people that's got a ring light for doing big book studies. I have a little light because I don't like the big light because it's too bright, it makes my sinuses hurt. But you know what I mean? Light changes how I look at things. But also, if you look at nature, we're talking about nature, it's like light is what allows plants to grow. Light allows growth. And so I love the metaphor of God as light. So that's my jam. So a new light had entered the dark world of the alcoholic. It was now time the struggling groups thought to place their message and unique experience before the world. This determination bore fruit in the spring of 1939 by the publication of this volume. So people were getting sober and staying sober, and this had not happened. In fact, in the totality of human history, there was a brief blip in the 1800s with the Washingtonian Society where people were getting sober and staying sober, and it was literally a blip. In I think it was less than 16 years, it had died out so completely that by the time Bill Wilson's helping to form Alcoholics Anonymous, he hadn't even heard of it. People did not get sober. People did not stay sober. But people were getting sober and staying sober. And so if you guys remember in kindergarten, did you guys ever play the telephone game? It has different names in different places, but we'll go with the telephone game. And that telephone game is where, somebody would whisper to somebody else and it would go around the circle. So I would whisper, Paige doesn't like the big light. And then it would go around and it would be like, so the hippopotamuses are purple. Like it would be completely different. And you see, part of why they wrote this book was to prevent the telephone game, was to prevent this message getting lost. This was a way to make sure that this message was replicable. And when it says this determined, and actually one of the things, I'll point out a little bit of the history. Yeah, I'm not calling it that though. So one of the things of the history is it was more Hank Parkhurst. Honestly, if it was not for Hank Parkhurst, we would not have this book. Sometimes you'll hear people say, Bill Wilson, man, he was a salesman. He wasn't. He wasn't even a stockbroker. He was a stock speculator. Hank Parkhurst was a salesman. And Hank Parkhurst really wanted to get this movement moving. And he was hoping that they could get an AA hospital. And it wasn't this nebulous idea. They had looked into like possible locations in Akron, Ohio to get an AA hospital. And they were hoping they could also get some money to have a professional class of 12 steppers who were paid to do it, like Dr. Bob. In his 16 years of life, of sobriety, he was credited for working with or helping at least 5,000 people. And they were like, well, maybe we should pay the guy because he's the most effective, And thank God they did not have the money for that. And so what they did was they had to scrape together enough money to write this book. And here's the thing. When they wrote this book, Hank Parkhurst was hoping that the book sales of this book would fund their other projects. Didn't happen. Nope. But isn't that always where a spiritual experience begins? A spiritual experience began Bill Wilson in the Mayflower Hotel in Akron, Ohio, with his business venture collapsing completely. This book began with Bill Wilson, Fitz Mayo, Hank Parker, some of those early guys not being able to get enough money to do the things that they wanted, to have like a AA hospital and paid 12 steppers. And as a result, we got exactly what we needed. Isn't that the way life seems to work for people like us? I don't get what I want, and instead I'm given what I need. So it says, so the determination bore fruit. So this work led to this book. It says the membership had then reached about 100 men and women, and it was closer to 80, and it was woman. It was one. And her name, and she didn't stay sober, but her name was Florence Rankin. And she is credited for why this book is not called 100 Men. Because she was like, absolutely not. Are we not calling it that? Absolutely no. No, we are not calling it no. So we can thank Florence. She was a real one. And her story was in the first edition, and it was called The Feminine Victory. And the first woman who was credited with permanent sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous was Marty Mann. There was also Sylvia Kay. She helped get the meetings going in Chicago. Yeah. I know. Whenever I hear me say, thank you. But Marty Mann was helped by reading that story, to that encouragement that women recover too. What a good name for Marty Mann's story, whatever. Anyway, focus. So it says the fledgling. Now, I apologize because y'all know I'm like, well, birds are fun. A fledgling is a stage in the life cycle of a bird. So that's where they're just got a little bit of feathers and they're just starting to learn to fly. Any younger, if they fall out of the nest, a little older, they're just a regular old bird. But fledgling, so it's just learning to take flight. So this fellowship, which is just learning to take flight, which had been nameless, now began to be called Alcoholics Anonymous from the title of its own book. That is important. And that is why we emphasized in the preface and in some of the forewords that the title of this book is not Alcoholics Anonymous. We call it the Big Book. And, for me, it's like, because I wasn't reading a whole lot of books when I got here. Actually, that's not true. But we call it the Big Book. And in the early days, the first edition, they used a heavy cardstock. So it would be like, ooh, look, you're getting your money's worth. But this book is called Alcoholics Anonymous. And the fellowship, Alcoholics Anonymous, is named after the book. That is how important this book is. We are named after the book, not the other way around. That's why I was emphasizing it, with much emphasis. Did I put the correct emphasis on the right syllable? I did not. So it said, the flying blind period ended, and AA entered a new phase of its pioneering time. And yeah, 1935 to 1939. So basically from when Bill got sober until this book went out to publication, they were blind. They were just trying to figure it out. And it says, with the appearance of the new book, a great deal began to happen. Dr. Harry Emerson Fosdick, and I will just say, ooh, they don't name him like they used to, like that. Ooh, what a name. I love it. The noted clergyman reviewed it with approval. And he was a well-known, famous clergyman, and who was held in American society in high regard. So it was some public publicity that he got. And it said, in the fall of 1939, Fulton Oursler. Oh, you'd swipe right on that, wouldn't you? See that on Tinder? I think right's the way that you swipe on Tinder. I actually don't. I don't know. But Fulton Oursler, sexy. Printed a piece, then editor of Liberty, and Liberty was one of the magazines that went out to the world. I'm sure Rob's going to put a picture of the Liberty or Harry Fosdick, which I will say is a very aggressive in all caps, Rob. Like, whoa. I don't think he's got a name that's meant to be in all caps. I think Fosdick is meant to be lowercase. I'm just kidding. But Liberty was one of those magazines that were readily circulated. So it says, then editor of Liberty printed a piece in his magazine called Alcoholics and God. This brought in a rush of 800 frantic inquiries to the little New York office, which meanwhile had been established. And goodness gracious, God bless, Ruth Hawk and Bobby B. Some of those early Rob. Those women who Ruth non-alcoholic, Bobby absolutely an alcoholic. These women that dedicated their lives to answering our mail. Those 800 frantic inquiries. Who sacrificed their time, their energy, in Bobby's case, her health and eventually her life, to help us. And so, but I always like to contextualize it in that way. Hold on, it says, each inquiry was painstakingly answered. Pamphlets and books were sent out. And I want to point something out. So there, up until that time, there's about 80 alcoholics, sober alcoholics, split between New York City and Akron, Ohio. Imagine in your home group. I wish I don't go to the service meetings for one day at a time. But let's say in your home group you got 20 members of the home group members, and all of a sudden you get 200 inquiries, people asking for help. We can see how overwhelming that was. And it says, businessmen traveling out of existing groups were referred to these prospective newcomers. Groups started up, and it was found to the astonishment of everyone that AA's message could be transmitted in the mail as well as by word of mouth. And here's what I'll say. If the message can be transmitted by mail, heck, some of you guys know when I was talking about Gary N., who's the author of The Story of Bobby B., AA's fantastic communicator. Powerful book. And actually, if you want to link to his presentation in the chat, you could do that. But she basically single-handedly sponsored Australia by mail. That is the power that can happen simply by mail. Now, keep in mind, then it should be no surprise that we can get well in Zoom. You know what I mean? In Zoom. There's power in this thing. It says by the end of 1939, it was estimated that 800 alcoholics were on their way to recovery. Again, imagine your home group goes from 20 members to 200 or 80 to 800. We see that there is something that is working here. There is something that is growing here. It says in the spring of 1940, John D. Rockefeller Jr. gave a dinner for many of his friends, to which he invited AA members to tell their stories. John D. Rockefeller, he was a rich dude, and he gave a lot of money in the 1920s and the 1930s to the prohibition movement. So he was a philanthropist. He gave away a lot of money to things to make alcohol illegal. And he was a famous guy. And so when he had this famous dinner, people were like, hey, I'm dining with the Rockefellers. What's going on with these alcoholics, eh? I didn't plan on doing the accent. Now I'm worried I won't be able to not do it, sir. I do not have a transatlantic. Okay. And it says, news of this got on the world wires, and inquiries poured in again. And many people went to the bookstore to get the book Alcoholics Anonymous. Again, we're named after the book. By March 1941, the membership had shot up to 2,000. So imagine in 2 years, going from like 200 or 8 or 20 to 2,000 or 80 to 2,000. Like, there is something at work here. There is an answer. But I also want to imagine, what would your group conscious look like if it had multiplied by that amount? Ooh, there's going to be some chaos. Ooh, ooh. Then Jack Alexander wrote a feature article in the Saturday Evening Post and placed such a compelling picture of AA before the general public that alcoholics in need of help really deluged us. That's to be overwhelmed. Now, Jack Alexander, or actually, first I'll explain the Saturday Evening Post. If anyone is a fan of Norman Rockwell, this is actually only a very obscure reference. But Norman Rockwell, he was an American painter, and he painted a lot of like Americana. And most of his paintings were covers, or many of his paintings were covers for the magazine, the Saturday Evening Post. So that's just if you needed a visual. My brain works with visuals. And if you're like, I don't know who Norman Rockwell is, I don't care, Paige. Reasonable. That is reasonable. I've given you unhelpful information, but I'm about to tie back in, make it helpful. So Jack Alexander, he was an investigative reporter. Like, he would go in and he wanted to like bust scams. And he did, like, his article that he did before this one was about it was either, I believe, the Philadelphia Labor Union, or it was like one of those where he's like, here's where they're getting rich. Here's where there's a scam. That was his whole deal. And then his editor is like, all right, Jack Alexander, you go. I'm here at Jack. You go investigate these drunks, because we know drunks getting together and they're saying they're helping each other. We know there's a scam. So Jack Alexander goes, and he says after his first meeting, he's like, am I meeting with like Broadway actors? He's like, what is up with these guys? But he came to discover that it was the real deal. It was alcoholics helping other alcoholics for fun and for free. And the article that he wrote, somebody who was known for like the Wizard of Oz, like pulling back the curtain and being like, gotcha, who was like, actually, no, this is the real deal. That message was so powerful that that people were like, man, we can trust this. And his article actually became a pamphlet in Alcoholics Anonymous. You can pick it up. It's called the Jack Alexander Article About AA. And he actually, from my understanding, he actually helped do some editing with the 12 and 12. And I would speak about this article a whole bunch. And to be honest with you, I hadn't read it for years. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, the Jack Alexander article, I didn't read it. It wasn't until I was asked to go speak on a piece of literature I hadn't read before, like read it before I speak on it. But you know what I mean? Like a new piece of literature where I'm like, that's an opportunity. And I will let you know, it is wild. I won't spoil it for you because that's how you guys got to read it yourself. There's a point in there where I'm like, whoa, you did what to try to stay sober? Gross. So throwing that out there, if there is anything that'll get somebody to read something, it's that. And I promise you, like, ooh, it's the part where the guy's got the milk leg. But I think if I didn't tell you about the milk leg, you'd figure it out on your own. Anywho, so it says by the close of 1941, AA numbered 8,000 members. So to go in about 2 or 3 years from 80 to 8,000. 80 to 8,000. It's talking about the tremendous growth. It says the mushrooming process was in full swing. AA had become a national institution. And I love that idea of mushrooming, because that idea that where do mushrooms begin to grow? In the dark. And where does God meet us? And Alcoholics Anonymous meet us, but in the dark. And so part of the reason that I'm talking about the tremendous growth of Alcoholics Anonymous during this era is to point out that what we have here works. It works. It is effective, but also, that's a lot of drunks trying to get along. So next week, when we dive into the bottom of this page, what we're going to have a look at is how the traditions began, how the traditions were formulated. So 3 minutes left. That's not too bad. I'll turn it over to you, Peppa.